Welcome to Restoring Education in America with Priscilla Rahn. She's a master educator and author, leading the conversation to restore the American mind through wisdom, virtue, and truth.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Restoring Education in America. I'm your host, Priscilla Rahn, and I am so grateful that you have decided to join the conversation today. I am loving this year, America's 250th birthday. We are celebrating all kinds of different ways. And one of the ways I'm celebrating is by opening a new private classical school in the Centennial, Colorado area called Excalibur Classical Academy. Our mission and vision is restoring America's heritage by developing servant leaders who are keepers and defenders of the principles of freedom, for which our founding fathers pledged their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. So if you have a young child that's starting kindergarten through third grade this fall, I would encourage you to go to our website, excaliburclassicalacademy.org, to learn more. And something that's really exciting is we have a very generous benefactor who is providing 100% scholarships for all of our inaugural families this fall. So you want to take advantage of it. And I am loving this classical model. I love talking to people who are immersed in the classical model. And today's guest is no different. I'm going to bring him to the stage. Welcome to Dr. Robert Robinson. Hello.
Thank you, Priscilla. Hello. I'm glad to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so grateful that you've carved out some time in your busy schedule. You are a principal and a fellow LPR grad. You are an alumni of 2025. And before we get too far into the conversation, I'm going to share a little bit of your bio with the listeners. So Dr. Robert Robinson began working at Liberty Common High School in 2011 as a history teacher. In 2018, he joined the administration as an assistant principal and was named principal in 2023. He holds a PhD and master's in history from the Ohio State University and a BA in history from Colorado State University. He's a proud parent of 3 Liberty Common High School graduates and 2 future graduates. And he's not just serious all the time. His hobbies include chess, disc golf, and reading. So welcome again to my show. We had the opportunity to have lunch a little while ago and to talk a little bit more. And I said, I have to have you on my show because you are very intelligent and very seasoned in classical. But before we start on that journey, tell me, what is disc golf?
Oh, frisbee golf, basically.
Oh.
Golf with a frisbee. And so it gets you outside, and it's something I really enjoy doing with my kids. I have a son who's actually on the CSU disc golf team, so it's become a kind of a family thing for us.
Okay, so that's fancy. For us commoners, it's called frisbee.
Yeah, frisbee golf. Yeah.
I love it. And it's interesting that chess is one of your hobbies, because I went to a fundraiser the other night and they were auctioning off a live auction of this chess set that was handmade, hand painted. And one side was the British and the other side were the American soldiers.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the chess set. And it's very big.
The 250th anniversary. That's great.
Yes. I spent way too much money on this chess set. So, but I feel like I have something very significant to share with the students. Okay, Dr. Robinson, you have been an educator in history, an assistant principal, and now principal of the #1 high school in the state of Colorado. That is amazing. Tell me, what drew you to education in your early years?
That's a great question. And I think, like so many of us, it's excellent teachers. But from very early on, even as early as elementary school, I always thought I might want to be a teacher. When I was in elementary school, I thought maybe I'll be an elementary teacher, and that just kept going up. And when I was in high school, I thought maybe a high school teacher. But I had two particularly impactful teachers in high school. One was my history teacher, really intelligent man with 3 master's degrees, and it just kind of clued me into the idea that history could be a serious academic pursuit. And he just lit a fire in me for sure. And the other was my physics professor or teacher, but he was a professor in a previous life, had a doctorate in physics. And so I actually started college as a physics major and transitioned to history. And both of those men were big inspirations for me along the way.
Very nice. I love hearing stories about teachers that inspired us. And we all have like our favorite teacher in school that helped inspire us. I have a niece who's a freshman in college, and she's a history major. And I interviewed her on my show, and I said, so what's it like? She's in the history club. They called it something else. There was a big fancy name for their history club. I said, what does it sound like when a bunch of historians are in a room talking? And that would be my question to you. What is it like being around other historians, and what era did you really enjoy?
Yeah, well, it's wonderful. You get to talk about big ideas with people who just enjoy learning and that passion for just education and curiosity. One of the neat things about history is that you can really study any discipline. You can do history of science and history of literature, and there's so many ways you can take it. There's philosophy, and so you can have a kind of a broad curiosity. And so for me, I was particularly attracted to foreign policy. I was really interested in, diplomacy and war and how our country interacts with others. And so my graduate degrees are in foreign relations history.
Very cool. I'm still trying to understand the proper role of American government when it comes to foreign policy. That was one of the topics in LPR where they spent the day talking about foreign policy. So I'm still trying to figure out where I land on that. When you think about what's happening with a lot of these foreign wars, like in Ukraine or even Iran, what do you think is the proper role of American government when it comes to foreign interests?
That's a great question, and a complicated one. And I'm not an expert on current policy as much as historical policy, but I think one of the key factors for the United States, especially if we're going to put our troops in harm's way, is there a key and clear American interest at stake? And if there's not, if our interests are primarily humanitarian, like we want to do good in the world and we want to see other people happy and free, then I think it's appropriate to do things like diplomatic support and verbal support and maybe even economic support or other things. But when we're committing Americans to fight and to die, to put themselves in harm's way, then I think it really has to be our own interests and the rights of Americans that are kind of guiding that as it's rising to a level where our rights are at risk, such that we need to, risk people paying the ultimate sacrifice and spending their blood for the defense of their country. That obviously should not be done lightly. So it should be a pretty high standard for it, I think.
Well, Dr. Robinson, we are seeing this surge in classical education. We're seeing a lot of parents pulling their kids out of public schools, putting them into charters, homeschools. Liberty Common is a public charter. What attracts you to the classical model?
Yeah, when I started at this school, I didn't really think of it as that. I just knew it was a place where I could teach history at a high level, and they didn't require a teaching license, which I was coming from the university setting, so that was helpful to me. But as I've been here, I've really become committed to the idea of classical education. And to me, and to us as a school, I think it means a couple of things. One of it is just traditional. We teach a kind of rigorous traditional approach that would have been, I think, commonplace 50 or 100 years ago. But education has moved in a lot of different directions, done a lot of different experiments. And so in some ways, I think we are just not innovative. We're doing things that have stood the test of time, doing some of the best educational practices that have been around for hundreds or even thousands of years, and just assuming and trusting that they do indeed still work. And part of it is exposing students to these great thinkers who have come before, starting from the roots of the classical tradition, Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, and coming up through these great thinkers over time, and helping students be part of that great conversation, to understand what's come before, and to be in a conversation not just with the people in their own time period, but understanding that there's wisdom in those who have come before. There's sometimes a kind of modern hubris where we think we must have all the answers, we're the most wise, we're at the pinnacle of history. And I think part of classical education is enough humility to realize that even though people in the past may not have had everything right, there's incredible wisdom there and incredible things to learn, and to not forget and not assume that we necessarily know better in our time in certain ways. Some ways we probably do know better, but there's a lot of wisdom in that past that we should respect.
I love talking to people in the classical world, because when you talk with them, everyone has this very unique way of explaining classical. Now, we have a very common language in the classical world. We use words like wisdom, virtue, truth, beauty. These types of words are very common, but the way people explain classical education is very unique. So as you're in the middle of recruiting for next year and talking with parents, does this question come up? Like, what is a classical education, and how would you explain it to someone who maybe isn't familiar with a classical education?
It does come up, and I find the same thing you do, that there's almost as many definitions of classical education as there are classical educators or classical schools. And we explain it in terms of rigorous traditional education. That the other thing maybe that I haven't mentioned is the virtue component, that we take the education of the whole person seriously. We want people to learn good character traits. And by that, I don't mean anybody's particular, religious tradition or anything, just kind of common sense, good character traits. We talk about the classical virtues like justice and temperance and fortitude. And we talk about gratitude and wisdom, and things that I would hope anybody could agree are good, positive traits, and that young people ought to learn. And so we want to marry good character education to good, rigorous content education. And those two things together, for me, are what's appealing about the classical model. And we're very excited about your school. It's great to see that. And I saw that, some of those same words, wisdom and truth, being at the core of the school that you're creating. And that's wonderful to see.
Well, obviously, as a student of Congressman Bob Schaefer, I got red pilled a few years ago as a new LPR person. And I've just been so immersed in this model. I'm determined after I retire this school year that classical will be the only model that I do for the rest of my educational career, because I'm just convinced that it is a very moral, a very virtuous model of educating young people. You just see the proof and the evidence in looking at your school, Liberty Common, as the #1 school in Colorado. That's no easy feat. So give us an inside scoop into some of the traditions that make Liberty Common so successful.
One of the things, and we're right here in hiring season, and so I certainly think of it, I don't know if it's a tradition, but for us, the key focus when we hire is content expertise. And that's one of the things that sets apart a charter school or private school from a public school, is we have the freedom to think about teacher license second and think about content expertise first. So when I hire someone to teach engineering, I can choose a former engineer. When I hire a physics teacher, I can choose someone with a graduate degree in physics and not worry if they have an education degree. We want people who are naturally good teachers, then we'll help them become better teachers. We can help them become great in the classroom, but we want that content expertise first. And you mentioned tradition. I think that is so key to a classical school. And Bob Schaefer, who we both know, who's the headmaster of this school, has been really effective at creating a sense of tradition and purpose in rites of passage. When students come to my campus, for example, they start at their previous campus when they're 8th graders, and they carry a lantern up in a big hike to our campus, and we call it Torch Trek. It's the Friday before school, and it's kind of symbolic of their, rite of passage from the junior high to the high school and entering this place of learning and bringing their kind of lamp of learning, and lots of good traditions like that that help students kind of enact or play out the idea of their educational journey.
That is beautiful. And you guys have such an abundance mentality. Every time I speak to someone at Liberty Common, you all are so generous with your time, information, and mentorship. And that just exemplifies why you are great and great for the community, because you're very generous with information. I know, Congressman Bob Schaefer wants every child to have this as an option, even though he believes that even public schools are options for parents, that, we should have choices for parents. And
Absolutely. And we 100% believe that educational choice is just crucial. Parents are the primary directors of their children's education, and they should have a good marketplace of options, whether it be a traditional large 5A public school, high school, or a charter school or a private school. And, in terms of generosity, it's true. Bob has set that culture. And the view is just basically, we're all government employees taking taxpayer money at a public charter school like ours. So, the public has a right to anything we have. And so we've actually done a project where we've encapsulated all of our curriculum and our assignments and our tests and our founding documents and put them on a website called Give Me Liberty, so that somebody can just sign up and download everything we've got. And a number of schools in Colorado have done that and essentially copied large portions of our model, and we're happy to see that. We're not trying to be a charter management organization or to franchise, but we would, we're happy to help and inspire and encourage other people wherever we can.
I had Dr. Cranwitter on, and he mentioned what you just mentioned, that you're not trying to duplicate yourselves as a charter network per se, because of this idea of neighborhood schools and having buy-in and having the community and the parents really be invested and making the school their own. And I was like, you know what, that's really phenomenal, because I can see you guys duplicating what you do, but would it work outside of really being driven by the parents?
Yeah, and there's some institutions that do that really well. Great Hearts down in Arizona has a nice model that they've duplicated pretty broadly. But for us, one of the original reasons we wanted a charter school in the first place was to bring those educational decisions to the building level, so the parents in that building could be the board members, could hire the headmaster and other school officials. And so it would kind of get us away from that if we became a broader, kind of franchised organization. It would disenfranchise a little bit the parents at each individual building. So for us, this is the right way for that reason. Yeah.
So I can see a little bit of a library behind you. I'm sure you have some amazing books. A lot of these are from LPR, and I'm just curious, talk about, you guys do summer reading. I know Bob talked about this, that you guys challenge each other to read one book for the summer. Talk about that process, and how do you guys decide what the whole school is going to read?
Well, the administration, first of all, anybody can make a suggestion. So we get teachers, front desk staff that send titles of books to us, and then we'll talk about them and think about it. And the goal is always to find books that'll help redirect people toward our mission. We're a charter school that's been around for 27 years, and one of the big temptations is to sort of drift away from your founding mission in some other direction based on the interests of the people who are currently here. And so we're always trying to find ways to reconnect us back. And usually those summer readings are some kind of content read. Last summer we read the Odyssey, which of course many of our staff had read before, but some hadn't. Some people in disciplines outside of the humanities, it's their first time cracking it open. And so to help them appreciate that kind of foundational text in Western literature and in Western thought was a fun thing. And then we do a series of talks throughout the year where different faculty members in our faculty meetings will take a piece of the book and relate it to their discipline. So we've had Odyssey talks about music and art and science, and ways that they can sort of apply that content to their disciplines. And so we try to do something like that every year. And I think one of the nice things is that we've occasionally read a pedagogy book or an education book but primarily they're content books, and they seem to go best when we read something from the actual curriculum.
Yes, I was really impressed to learn about this. And I went to your Festival of Ideas, and I know you guys do wonderful events all year long. I would encourage anybody to reach out, come and take a tour of your school. You have several campuses, building beautiful new classrooms coming up in the next year or two, right? But with Festival of Ideas, how do you go into the planning of that? Because you have all of these wonderful breakout sessions. You have keynote speakers. Last year you had doctors Perrins, or I think I know Dr. for Christopher Perrin has a PhD, and Christine.
Yeah. And Christine, yeah.
Okay. Trying to remember. Both very different, with very different emphasis. But how do you start planning and deciding who's going to speak and do their breakout sessions at your event?
That's become a really nice thing, and it started as just professional development for our own staff, and something for our own students to create a conference where, well, we just think the best kind of professional development is in the content. We want to teach teaching techniques, but we especially want content experts and people to know about the whole curriculum. And so finding amazing people like the parents to come and speak is actually largely the initiative of a single one of our teachers, our art department chair, Meg Salazar. And we go down every year to the National Symposium for Classical Education in Tempe, Arizona. And she's kind of on a mission there. We all are, but especially her, to identify the best speakers from that conference, which is a really kind of big deal on a national stage, and see who we can convince to come to our smaller but still locally significant conference. And we've had really good luck getting some very impressive people. And boy, the parents just knocked it out of the park. They're fantastic, and just great voices for the classical movement, and incredibly accomplished and thoughtful and well-spoken individuals.
Yes, and it was amazing because there was such a mix of starting out with your students who were musicians, and I, as a music educator, I didn't know what to expect. And of course, I was delighted by the little violin player and the pianist and the music educators. And I thought, wow, this is filling my soul. And the day just got better and better and better as we went along. And then, of course, breaking bread with you and the other educators there, it made it seemed palatable for someone who's still very new in the classical arena, because I think people think about classical where people are sitting at desks and their hands are folded and it's very rigid. But it's not like that at all. So talk a little bit about the environment, because I don't want to tell too much. Your students who gave the tour, they were just so fun. I think it was Dorothy and Oliver who were giving the tour. But talk about what someone would see and experience culture-wise at your school.
Yeah, that's a great point. That there is sometimes this kind of very serious and heavy sort of reputation for a classical school, but really what I think is important is the idea of curiosity and just wonder. And so what you would really find is people who are passionate about learning, passionate about their curriculum, about literature, about understanding the natural world. And so you'd see classrooms where genuine content experts are helping students awaken their curiosity and then have the expertise to satisfy that curiosity in all of these different subject areas. And so it's light and pleasant and happy and, serious in its academic pursuits. But I think you're right that sometimes there's this almost dour reputation for classical schools, and it doesn't feel like that at all. If it did, I wouldn't have my own children here. But for me, this is the only environment I wanted them educated in. They came after me. I taught here for 1 year, and after a year, I decided I've got to bring my kids with me, even though this is the next town and it's not terribly convenient. I just wanted them here as soon as I could get them here.
So in general, when we talk about history, we talk about our nation and our Declaration of Independence, where we talk about our inalienable rights from the Creator. And then that opens up another conversation about God and Christianity. And then that opens up another conversation about freedom of religion. Just kind of talk about, how do you embed a conversation about God? For me, it's easier because I'm opening a private school. But in a public charter, you kind of have to walk a walk to not overstep maybe what parents might expect their children to learn, but how do you embed this conversation about God or the creator in a classical education?
Well, yeah, I think you're right that as a public school, we really can't embed it. We teach a secular curriculum for sure. The classical model has been very popular among a number of Christian families, and that's wonderful. And so I'd like to think that our educational model is one that they can use as a supplement for the kind of education they're doing at home, for the religious education they might be helping their children with. And so we won't do any explicitly religious education, but certainly in helping students understand the roots of the Western tradition, the roots of the society in which they live. There are elements where they can see that in American history, religion has been significant for the founders, religion has been a driving factor. But of course, even among the founders, religious belief was quite varied and eclectic and not necessarily Christian, not necessarily one thing or the other. And so for us, it's not something we necessarily do directly, but we don't intend to or believe that we can be all things for a family, that we are part of their education. And so we are a content provider for the things we can provide. And then parents can and ought to, provide all these wonderful other opportunities for their children. And so this is a model that ought to appeal to anybody, Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or in no religious tradition at all. They ought to find what they want in a school like ours. And so it's wonderful that schools like yours exist in that broader educational marketplace that can, as a private school, be explicitly religious in one way or another. And that's a great model too. And for a public charter, we'll have a model that, supports families in whatever tradition they want to be in.
Yeah, I always say there's a lid for every pot. So there's enough choices out there for parents to find a great option. And we know in Colorado, if you live close to Fort Collins, you gotta move and buy a house in the Fort Collins neighborhood to get this wonderful education that you are providing. Dr. Robinson, what is your website and how can people learn more about Liberty Common?
We're libertycommon.org, and we would love to have people here at the school. We give tours every week. At my campus, it's 10 a.m. any Thursday. Just show up, and we'll be happy to take you around. A lot of times that's me or one of my assistant principals. We do public information nights several times a year. And as you mentioned, that Festival of Ideas is a wonderful option. Every first Saturday in October, we do a free conference open to the public just based on academic content in a variety of subject areas. And would love to have anybody there, even if they have no particular association to the school. You don't need to be a student or a parent. That's open to the community, and we want that to be something that we can provide. So, yeah, I would love to get to know more people and have you come learn about us.
Well, Dr. Robinson, we are out of time. I am so grateful that you have shared with us today all of your wisdom, and we're wishing you all the best as you finish out the school year and graduate wonderful young servant leaders out into the world. And best of luck as you recruit for next year. You're growing, and so there's lots of space. I know, like you can grab lots of kids.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on. It was great to talk, and I wish you luck with your project and launching this school as well. Thank you. Very, very fun to catch up.
And to my listeners, thanks so much for tuning in, and catch me next time. And remember, educating the mind without the heart is no education. So seek wisdom, cultivate virtue, and speak truth.
Thanks for tuning in to Restoring Education in America with Priscilla Rahn. Visit PriscillaRahn.com to connect or learn how you can sponsor future episodes to keep this message of faith, freedom, and education on the air.